Good afternoon, this is David Stewart speaking from the Scottish Parliament. Today I was speaking on a debate about the living wage. The living wage being a minimum of £7 an hour, which has been introduced in the past in London and of course in the city of Glasgow with great success. My contribution was to argue that this debate's wider than just about the mechanics of the living wage. It's about fighting inequality, fighting low wages generally, and it's also looking about the mismatch where over 60% of low wage workers are women. Much of the emphasis behind the setting up by Attlee of the welfare state was about fairness, and it was about dignity of individuals. And I believe that the living wage is a very exciting concept. It is of course part of the UK Labour government's manifesto for power. We of course haven't yet set the manifesto for the Scottish Parliament next year, but I believe that a living wage is a very important component which certainly can be looked at when it comes to drawing out the manifesto. There's been some excellent evidence across the world how well living wage works. For example, in Calgary, in LA, I've all had great examples of how the beauty about living wages is very good for productivity. It stops workers leaving, so it's actually self-funding in many places at present. There's still major gaps in Highlands and Islands as far as low pay concerned. Not as many in the health services. In Scotland there's around 5,000 workers who are under the £7 an hour. With the new pay rises coming into force soon, though that will basically be reduced to zero, but in local authorities we still considerable numbers of workers who are well under the £7 an hour. For example, in Highland Council, the last figures had was around 800 workers were under that £7 an hour threshold. We also feel it's important that the private sector is involved here. So for example, when private sector firms are tendering for local authority work, the expectation is they'll pay their workers £7 an hour, and this will be a great benchmark for the private sector and indeed the voluntary sector as well. And organisations like Child Poverty Action Group and The Big Issue have that ethos of paying a living wage. So I think it was a very interesting debate today. I do believe it's an important contribution to fighting inequality, but fighting low pay. It's got particular resonance in Highlands and Islands where low pay historically has been a particular problem. There's issues with the sectors of low pay, for example in catering, in tourist related industry, and of course the Highlands and Islands is well represented in that areas. I also made great play about the minimum wage. I was fortunate to be in Westminster when that was passed, and was there during the 28 divisions all night when we finally got the minimum wage, which made a huge difference, particularly in the Highlands and Islands. Of course, we can't sit back on our laurels. We've got to look carefully at how we can protect low-pay workers and fight inequality. So it was an excellent debate, but it's got particular relevance for the Highlands and Islands. And I enjoyed making the contribution, and it's obviously an issue that's going to run and run for the future. And I look forward to this debate continuing, and certainly support the great work that organisations involving campaigning against low pay have done, particularly my own union, Unison.